Good evening. This is another in the series called Television. This hour is devoted to a very special form of program, the documentary. I'm Bruce Rogers. One of my most enjoyable periods in this industry was a brief few seasons doing The Rogers Report. It dealt with social issues and consumer topics like food additives or the cost of dental care. The documentary is based on research, thorough research. Then interviews seek a balance of views and more information. The camera takes an animated, close-up look at the people and processes involved. Then the reporter ties it together with a thesis, in-the-field reports, and a balanced conclusion to complete the documentary. Well, these days, there are a few of them, sometimes on the CBC's Journal or on 60 Minutes in the U.S. And in newscasts, the form shows up in 3-minute mini-docs, short documentaries on complex subjects. But there was a time when the documentary was a major form on television, as it had been for the film industry. The National Film Board of Canada perfected the documentary and won Oscars. And the big networks have mounted TV documentaries on topics as varied as the loss of farmland and the pain of Vietnam. Perhaps there are fewer of them now because videotape has replaced film. And while both record events, the editorial art and special montage language of film is neglected for the economy and speed of tape. The documentary has long been prominent in radio here on the CBC and on BBC in Britain, but now it's an endangered species. It apparently lacks commercial appeal. Sponsors find it an expensive way to reach a small audience. It may be that the documentary is thought to be teachy, preachy, and dull. That's a danger with programs that seriously try to inform. But it need not be dull, as many powerful documentaries have proved. You'll see some examples in this hour. Nature films, shots of the slums of Glasgow, and an escape from East Berlin. The 70s was a decade of documentaries, programs bent on honest reflection and examination. They offered clear editorial commentary, intense exploration of a single topic, and background essential for understanding the news. What we've seen over the years is the documentary's fall from favor. It may yet bounce back. But in this hour, in our history of television, we'll watch the rise and fall of the documentary.
I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow.
Today and rather good evening.
The energy and persistence with which the documentary has examined the globe in a television lifespan of only 30 years has been remarkable. In 1952, the BBC began the first real documentary series in this country. It opened with a film on housing in Glasgow.
So you've come to Glasgow, have you? Pretty grim, isn't it? Dirt, filth, stench everywhere. And believe me, there are literally hundreds of back courts, every bit as bad as this in Glasgow.
And it was so grim that after the program finished, we had lots of phone calls. They did not believe that the slums of the Gorbals could exist. They thought in some way we had faked the thing. Television could therefore show people something which they might have read about, they might have seen still photographs of. Now, of course, they believe everything.
But only 10 years later, an American audience were taking in their stride film of a dangerous rescue tunnel being dug into East Berlin under the wall.
The sound of the tunnel itself. A streetcar running along Bernauer Strasse, 15 feet straight up. If they could hear sounds made 15 feet above, could the Vopos hear sounds 15 feet below? The Vopos, they knew, had listening devices. Each foot closer to their goal brought them 1 foot nearer to the danger of capture. They could not know who...
10 years later, in 1972, equipment had been perfected to show remarkable close-ups of bird flight in motion. And 3 years ago, in 1982, Almost the Ultimate, a Swedish documentary from inside the human body itself.
The camera is now making a remarkable journey. It's traveling the same route as a sperm. It's on its way out of the male sex organ, and it's now passing through the vas deferens. And here, the sperm armada continues on its long journey and now finds itself in the urethra.
We started, after the war, with the audience a blank sheet of paper. Almost everything one could film they had not seen before. Now people have seen almost everything. There is nothing new under the sun, and the subject matter is all being used up. So from that point of view, it's more difficult to do something which is new.
The single documentary always had an audience from the earliest days of BBC television. The Crown Film Unit had built a wartime cinema audience recording the lives of ordinary people. But they had trouble recording the most important element, location sound, with the heavy 35mm studio cameras.
There's no question that sound, in many ways, is the most important ingredient, because sound carries all the intelligence, it carries the humor, it carries the personalities.
Calling all workers.
That same piece of film came to life when a radio track was added back at base.
Music while you work will be played to you this morning on Rhythmic Records.
The TV documentary came of age almost immediately, with a stunning portrait of ordinary people in the streets of a northern city. In a rare piece of poetry, Dennis Mitchell solved the sound problem by running BBC radio tapes over pictures.
Impossible to imagine that never before in the history of the world had people ever heard real people talking. All they'd heard on the BBC radio were actors, announcers, and all that sort of thing, or else real people, what I choose to call real people, reading scripts.
He picks it up, the vet, looks at it, he said, this budgie's not egg-bound. He said it's got a tumour, and with that he just threw it in the fire. So Madge says, good heavens, she says, my lads will go mad, what did you do that for? He said, well, cremation is the most hygienic thing, madam. That will be 7 and 6.
Oh, did the flaming thing there, Barry? Get some nerves with this at times with that thing when he's chowing and going on with this stuff. It hasn't been a good boy. As I was telling you, obviously a new job I'd been at, you see.
The landlord came up, you see, the other day, and he said to me, is your sister still living with you? I said, yes. I said, you can't put that in.
So I started to speak to her, and I said, I suppose you're wondering why I'm reading my Bible in here. She said, well, it did seem a bit
Talk, talk, talk. I love to listen to it. Go round in the mornings, down the street, yap, 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 talk,
The
talk,
landlord
talk.
came up,
I
you see,
love
the
to
other day,
listen to
and he
it.
said to me,
I'd fallen in love with human voice, really. The way people talked. It wasn't what they said so much as how they said it. And these you can't reproduce. Actors can't do it. We've tried. You can't reproduce it. The passion and the sadness. In prison, I spent 3 weeks in prison, actually in a cell.
And now the prison lies quiet. Most of the men will be asleep now. But in some cells, there will be men lying on their beds, staring at a blank wall, or crying. Men cry easily and often here. Or talking endlessly to themselves, their thoughts going round and round like squirrels in a cage.
Supposing I escape, there are only about 4 people in the whole world with whom I'd like to spend the rest of my life. If I escape, they're the only people I shan't be able to go near.
I think myself that 5 years that I got for 3 eightpence, I got it for taking 3 eightpence off a counter in Bolton. Your brain's always working till it sends you a bit mental some road, must it?
Come on, get out of it.
At last, morning.
Poetry. Wherever I go, meeting people, I'm absolutely astonished the whole time, now, just as much as then, at people's quality of strength and dignity and all this stuff. It's still here.
Thou shalt not squander away thy daily pay by the means of pontoon, banker, or brag.
These early documentaries were poetic statements. They revealed human character in a world before it had been changed by mass culture.
When I leave the school, I'm going to College Court. And then I will be going to Westminster boarding school if I pass the exam. And then we think I'm going to Cambridge and Trinity Hall.
I had this terrible curiosity about other people. And I think I caught it from my mother. You know, I remember once she came home and she said, I heard a woman today say to another woman, and we never ate margarine since my dad died. There's a whole novel there, and she was so excited about it. It's marvelous. And I caught this sort of curiosity.
And I thought that I'd very much like to do a portrait of a community. I chose a mining village in Yorkshire and chose a wedding as a theme, and people were therefore feeling personally emotional, and I thought they're more likely to tell the truth. wedding on Saturday people were extremely optimistic. What they talked about the present and the future, meaning 1963 onwards, was in fact full of optimism, without any doubt whatever.
How old are you?
15.
Your address?
97 Camford Crescent, Grimsby.
Let's see what chips we have available. Yes, there's a vacancy on the roster now. We'll put you on that one.
Does that go to Ireland?
Yes. You'll be away for 3 weeks.
Oh, could you tell me when it sails, please?
The day after tomorrow.
So soon. I'm going. When? Day after tomorrow. Oh, you're not here? Yeah.
Times have changed. People have not changed. Good, splendid qualities are still there. Television companies have changed. I think the rot started for me when the journalist took possession of television. You see presidents assassinated and riots, blood all over the place. Much more exciting than a scrap of poetry. Pity.
We're on a C-47. We're going over enemy territory.
The TV documentary took on a new form. Journalists with microphones and opinions were telling their audience what to think.
In front of me is a pile of leaflets which say, bring this leaflet in and you will be giving safe passage. Signed, General Mark Clark.
All that mattered now was the script.
Throwing out other leaflets, and there they go.
Here in Korea, the American journalist Ed Morrow is inventing the formula later used by hundreds of panoramas and world inactions.
And now over to Ed Morrow.
They tell me that this gun is called Baby. Who named it anyway?
Pictures are important, but the picture was secondary to what Morrow was saying. But if you don't get the word right, typewriter, pencil, writing it down, getting it straight, and then let the picture follow it, you're in trouble.
Have you got your Christmas presents all right?
Yes, sir. I'm waiting on about 5 more.
About 5 more. Heard from your girl?
Yes, sir.
Good.
The sheer bulk of the 35mm camera meant you couldn't move it about very easily. And so we had to rehearse people.
You live here?
Live here? You don't call this living. I call this existing. Who could live under these circumstances? But however, we'll never lack company. We've always got the rats.
So one was actually rehearsing members of the public as if they were actors.
Mr. Malcolm, I'm Jemison Clark from the BBC.
The documentary journalists were different. They were advocates. Their idea in the 50s and 60s was to use television to solve social problems. They uncovered unpleasant truths.
How often do you have visitors?
Oh, very seldom. I'm like this.
What will you be doing on Christmas Day?
On Christmas Day? Well, this day I'll be in bed.
I felt that I was in a very privileged position to be allowed to make 45 minutes programs about whatever social problem it might be, and to persuade people to accept the point of view which I wanted to put across in the programs.
What are the main difficulties of teaching in this room?
Well, the main difficulty, I think, is the question of people passing through to get from one room to another.
When you come to the end of a program, you should feel you've experienced something. Whereas when you've watched a current affairs program, you've probably been told about it. You've gathered a certain amount of information. You haven't actually experienced it.
This scene is not taking place in the Congo. It has nothing to do with Johannesburg or Cape Town.
All right, hello.
These are citizens of the United States, 1960.
These are the forgotten people, the underprotected, the undereducated, the underclothed, the underfed.
The world was a simple place then. People were optimistic. It was thought the problems of poverty, homelessness, and race would be solved by putting them on television. But this was journalism, not art. It would be forgotten. But the artists fought back, helped by new technology.
The way the world was making documentary films was haywire, that we had to stop lecturing. That is, we had to stop the narration and let people talk. We needed a way to capture that, and we spent $500,000, I would say, on making the Oricon camera work smaller, lighter, become portable.
This was the result. The lightweight camera that could go anywhere, recording sounds and emotions. Robert Drew had discovered a new documentary form, reality as it happened.
So I went to Washington and proposed to Kennedy that we were going to start a new kind of filmmaking. The camera would have to live with him from dawn to dusk for a week or so. No reporter asking him questions. We weren't interested in him talking to us. We were interested in seeing what he did.
Brought him forward and talk about education. To do it for 15 minutes, I think, would alleviate a lot of problems.
Well, we could do it, I suppose, we could do it, I don't think we want to do it a half hour.
The president has called Robert Kennedy to confer on Alabama and civil rights. The president must decide whether or not to speak out anyway in a nationwide TV address.
Well, anyway, let's pass on now. I think we're going to get something ready anyway because it may be tomorrow.
Well, we got a draft.
A man at his desk, whether it's the Oval Office or any other desk, is a man in a closet. And a film resulting from that will be a dull film no matter who's behind that desk. But if we can wait until there's a crisis, until your back is to the wall and you have to make decisions that are difficult, then we'll have a film.
Robert Kennedy had a crisis. As Attorney General, he was trying to get black students enrolled at Alabama University in the Deep South.
Hello?
Drew now had a dramatic storyline. George Wallace, the governor, has said he will physically stand in the doorway and prevent the students coming in. This is Robert Kennedy's representative on the campus, Nicholas Katzenbach.
This is from the governor. Yeah, but is he talking directly to the governor, Katzenbach?
And I've come here to ask you now for an unequivocal assurance that you will permit these students who, after all, merely want an education at a great university...
Well, now, you make your statement, but we don't need you to make a speech. You make your statement.
I will make my statement, Governor. I was in the process of making my statement. And I'm asking from you an unequivocal assurance that you will not bar entry to these students, to Vivian Malone and to James Hood, and that you will step aside peacefully and do your constitutional duty as governor.
Drama is lived out in people's minds. And how close can you get to the feelings of people, to seeing into people instead of looking at them?
Is he getting to talk to the governor?
Emotion and drama are the things that are missing from the documentary film today, which could be the basis for a television journalism that would involve everybody, involve large audiences in learning about what's going on in the world.
In the 60s, filmmakers with the new mobile cameras would find remarkable drama. Documentary reached a high point. This is the resolution as the tunnelers break through into East Berlin.
Two Vopos walked past, one casually glancing in the shrapnel-pitted doorway of number 7. In 10 minutes, the first of the refugees would come. They would come through in this order. First, Peter's wife and baby and mother, and then Peter would come through. And behind him, Hasso Herschel's sister and her family.
This was heroism
This was an adventure of the human spirit. This showed that people would still risk for matters of principle and freedom and so forth. The opportunity for a film crew to be present as an event unfolds instead of arriving after it has burst out and asking a lot of people what had happened is rare in any context.
We by then had the 16mm cameras with synchronized sound for 4 or 5 years. We got used to using them. We knew how to make them do what we wanted them to do. So we were able to hear members of the royal family speaking informally to each other and to other people for the first time. Before then, nobody had ever heard the Queen speak except in a prepared statement made into a battery of microphones.
What do you have? Molly. Ice cream. This is what he really would like. Yes, you always go straight for ice cream. Yes. No. Well, would you like cream? Get one. Have you got any bullseyes? I didn't remember last time that you brought it was raining too. They're all foggy, aren't they? Have you had a lot of people in here? There's been a lot of very busy summer. How much is it? Could you possibly do it? Jesus, that's all I got. Thank you. Here, thank you very much. You are. And the man too. Yes, you can do this first. We'll take it to the car. Thank you very much.
At the end of the 60s, the documentary camera went further afield and found exotic new faces. But the filmmakers found these lives and habits were remarkably similar to the ones they had already been recording in the West.
Tabarandai tata, amukete ntoki natisho. Yako mara antarka seta ukolake o.
Noro sende angita nabo. Moya.
Omeikiari. Nepingita lalem inebwakiti ai. Kakore belo arbaya ningangiti. Nilotu alangata lino kawarie.
For many viewers, the documentary is no more complicated than the vast world of nature. Almost as strange as the pictures themselves is the length to which the small group of cameraman experts are prepared to go to get their subject.
So when this whole gadget and myself were in the water filming, it looked to an ordinary pelican like an oversized pelican. So finally, I had the whole thing assembled and I went into the water. And I was really very nervous whether it would work or whether it wouldn't. So I had to swim about 1.5 miles around the island to face the pelicans, which were all in the water.
No matter how much equipment you have, or how much you know about the animals, many things can still go wrong. And something usually does. Hunter and hunted may disappear into a sea of long grass.
or into a cloud of dust. Or the cheetah, after a good start, may lose the gazelle. The black-necked, or spitting cobra, not only has a deadly bite, but can also spit its venom for up to 6 feet. It aims for the eyes. The spitting action lasts only a 20th of a second. Joan has only one problem. She is the target. When Alan is ready, she will move in to make the snake spit, right on cue.
But the social documentary would change, largely because of television itself.
Tonight, an Eastern Airlines passenger jet is forced down at Miami International. A close call for the passengers on board.
He had 2 big trees there. He could have easily gotten a blade strike. And we were out here in the middle of nowhere.
At the end of the 60s, nightly news images flooded endlessly into our homes. We saw everything. The world grew up.
Evidence out.
Man even walked on the moon. To compete, the television documentary, too, would lose its innocence.
Television documentary makers now are reflecting what they see on the television news. And the tendency is to make programs about institutions, which are also part of the same pattern, I think, like the police, like women in prison, like the Air Force. They are dramatic, and we do live, indeed, in a dramatic world which is quite different from the world of the 1960s.
Here, a prisoner has accused an officer of striking him. The charge is serious enough to be brought before an outside committee.
Officer, during this exchange with Smith that you just told us about, where were your keys?
My keys are in my pockets over there, though.
It is alleged by Smith that you struck him on the right cheek, on the face, with your keys. No. Did you ever touch him during this incident?
No, sir.
Senior Officer Duncan, please.
Duncan, you know the incident with which we're dealing at the moment. I have read out this statement. This is your statement.
Yes, ma'am.
The officer said in his statement that he checked myself through the spiral and saw no blood on my face. I'd like to put to the officer, how can he do this if I was stood up at the window straight after tea talking to the lads out of the window?
Yes, ma'am. Smith was not up at the window. He was sat on his bed, facing me with his back to the headboard.
I think if you went, for example, into a very boring office where people do very boring jobs and put a camera team there, they wouldn't be able to forget the camera because what they're doing doesn't interest them as much as the presence of the camera crew interests them. If, on the other hand, you get people doing something in which they're under stress, then the camera becomes subordinate to all of that, and you get a much more interesting film.
We have decided that you will lose 40 days remission and that there will be loss of 14 days earnings, privileges and associated work.
Already don't want
The situations of stress that the documentary makers needed came from closed institutions, where violence was commonplace. The images now were seldom cozy. Here, in strange ways, it is thought the prisoner Smith will try to harm himself physically after losing his complaint. He is known to have a history of mental illness.
All right, come on, let's go and get out of here.
To get scenes as dramatic as this, huge amounts of film had to be shot. The documentary became a series, using up subjects for all time.
We appear to live in a world which is dominated by problems in the sense that the early 1960s were not, in fact, dominated that way. I'm sure that is why television documentary makers now are reflecting what they see on the television news.
What you are about to see is a candid report. Events such as these happen every day in every urban setting, wherever there is high crime.
We produced a documentary about the highest crime police precinct in the city, which is located in the South Bronx.
It was a portrait of the officers and their daily confrontation with crime situations.
This is where they have a crap game over here.
They got the other crap game
right
over here.
So that's the crap game here. Now you watch everybody run, except the guy dancing.
I don't want to see any of the dice rolling.
Chaotic. They're obviously not going to move until we can get more assistance to do something about it, have I?
After police in the USA came police in Britain. The documentary was now a series, using up the lives of policemen, hospital patients, and servicemen, as if they were in a soap opera.
And then we'll get them out of the road.
Yeah, one dog, don't we?
There should be a few more coming. There's a bit of a mistake with the location.
Yeah, we'll try, but as I say, we're completely outnumbered. There's very little we can do at present, have I?
In the series Sailor, a new pilot is trying to land on HMS Ark Royal, another stress situation.
When he's coming there for the first time, he's obviously very nervous. Understandably so. He's heard all of the hairy stories of people crashing on the deck and so forth.
He goes flying close, it's the only saying. And he's a new guy, so it's worth watching. You're very slow, monsieur.
Boulder, full power.
Yes, just get the LSS and just have a chat to him.
Yeah.
Slow.
It's the first time ever to the deck.
That's better, isn't it? Come on, keep it coming down, keep it coming down. Now you're rotating it.
Bolter.
Right, tell the LSS train that was a much better approach, and the next time just keep on putting it forward and keep it coming down. Good. He said it. Nice.
Keep it coming down.
Keep it coming down. Come down. No. That thing's had enough for one day. Keith, if he bolts this time, I think we'll send him to Morgan. 6, 7 approaches now. Good rollers, that's enough. Yes. Now this is better than the last two. A little bit longer, just a little bit further out. Don't go high.
Hold it there, coming down. Come on, get it down. Get it down.
He's on. Hey,
I doesn't know what's happening now.
I'm glad I'm on, put it that way.
In this month of October, thousands are still starving. Thousands are still dying. This Ethiopian famine, unknown until now, is certainly the worst the world has experienced since Biafra.
Journalists who ran the news documentary programs were also reflecting the alarming decades of the 70s and 80s. But the problems they were now recording were well beyond the scope of television to solve.
The problems are more difficult to solve in the 80s than the 60s, undoubtedly. And I suppose that many television filmmakers of documentaries might feel almost guilty if they did something as naive as a portrait of a Yorkshire village built round a wedding, and all the people who took part had no particular problems at all.
Viewers expect television to solve the problems. Television can't do that. Television is there to expose the problems. It's up to the authorities and to governments, and in the final analysis, to the electorate to do something to change them.
World in Action helped an impressive number of causes onto the national agenda. But surprisingly, there was seldom direct change. The images had perhaps become too familiar.
What I'm saying is that there is nobody who works for us in Ceylon who at the end of a week or the end of a day has not got enough money with which to buy himself enough to eat.
What is she suffering from?
Malnutrition, anemia,
And bronchitis.
bronchitis at the moment.
This program helped to end starvation on British-owned tea plantations in Sri Lanka.
How would you prove that you are the parents of your children? What would you do to prove that I haven't done? You tell me I will will do that to prove that I'm the mother of those 3 children.
The program would prove she really did have 3 children halfway around the world, and it would put pressure on the Home Office to reunite the family in this country. And, notably, one man's journalism raised £19 million for food and medicines in Cambodia. But direct results like these were surprisingly few.
There are 558 people in this, the main hospital of Phnom Penh, and most of them are children and babies. They are dying because they have virtually nothing of value to eat. No fresh water, no vitamins, no milk. And there are no medicines to speak of, no antibiotics, and not even enough bandages. One little boy's screams can be heard out in the street, rising and falling in agony. He is starving.
The compassion of the television audience was always evident. Governments who made legislation usually turned a blind eye. Borrowing from the social documentary, dramatists with plays like Cathy Come Home were suddenly having more impact than real films about homelessness. The documentary was now under threat from TV drama as well.
We had a bite to eat from the cafeteria. Of course, the kiddies didn't know what was going to happen. But I knew they'd catch up with us, wherever we tried to bed down for the night.
We wanted it to be as accurate as the documentaries that were being made, like World in Action and so on, which, when you saw a good documentary, it really pulled you up short because you knew that was actually happening. And we wanted drama to have that same kick.
And the other thing is that in a month's time, we've got a place to go to.
You've got a place in a month's time?
Yes, on the new Smithson estate. They're giving us a new flat there.
We're told that you lost your place on the list long ago, owing to moving. 500 families have moved in already.
But we was meant to be one of those families.
After this documentary about Quentin Crisp by Dennis Mitchell, art would mirror life again in a television play, which had more impact.
I could offer you a huge, great glass of stout. Sure. I drink this stuff at dawn because it makes the day shorter. My appearance is mild now compared with what it was like 40 years ago, when my hair was hennaed, my eyelids were gold, my fingernails and my toenails were gold, and I was blind with mascara and dumb with lipstick. Sometimes it led to my being beaten up, mauled about, and sometimes actually beaten up. But this, of course, I had to expect.
He said, I'm ready now to die. I have nothing more to say. I'm a perfect work of art, and I'm finished. Not very long after that film. Instead of dying, he went to America and became an enormous success. It was Jack Gold's film which followed mine 2 or 3 years later, which really made his fame and fortune.
Good evening, gentlemen. Look at the bonnet. Makeup on. What you got makeup on for, eh? He's a woman. No, isn't he? He's a geezer.
Gentlemen, if I may speak for a moment, allow me to reassure you that... Taxi?
Those TV movies that are shown as docudramas of real-life people's stories tend to attract much larger audiences than documentaries. They use well-known stars. The production values are obviously much higher. They can dramatize things that a documentary filmmaker might find extremely difficult to actually happen upon with his or her camera.
In America, the television documentary is being killed by news and drama series. Alan and Susan Raymond made this famous documentary, The Police Tapes. It later became the model for a soap opera.
All right, I got something here. This guy's supposed to be in this command. Wanted by the 2-8 for attempted murder with a gun. He's living right now at 1240 Walton Avenue. Make a couple stops up there just in case during the night. See if you can come up with him.
All right, 1185 Anderson, right? The Black Liberation Army. They seem to be milling around that area again. They're talking about a Volkswagen Red. John, what's the car you saw last night?
The Volkswagen van. Red, white top. That's it. That's the end of the story. Let's be careful out in the street. Let's go. Come on. Take a boat.
really was the model for the TV series Hill Street Blues. One must say that they viewed our documentary and chose not only the concept of the police precinct in a kind of dangerous neighborhood, but also really many of the stylistic devices as well, the handheld camera work.
Starsky and Hutch will not be seen tonight, so that we may bring you the following special program from ABC News.
To compete, the documentary in America has had to become more sensational than drama.
It's gun talks. Brings me money, brings me a lot of things. I don't use it just to shoot people and all that, you know. Just use it for protection, you dig? This is what talks around this neighborhood.
You see, a documentary in that market has difficulty in competing. And too often it has to outdo in sensationalism, in the bizarre, in the provocative nature of the investigation, sometimes very irresponsibly, I must say.
To counter falling ratings, the Japanese have invented a new documentary form, simulated action. Here, a team of 800 Sherpa porters are beginning the ascent of Everest for a Japanese television company. Rather bizarrely, their object is to help this man to ski down Everest.
Chomo Luma, Mother Goddess of the world.
6 weeks later, and after the deaths of 6 Sherpas, our hero is ready to ski 8,000 feet down the mountainside.
They read a final checklist to me through a transceiver in my helmet. There's the main chute attached to my waist. Oxygen tank firmly attached. There's a safety pin being removed. It looks skiable. There's no way to know what the wind is like. If it's behind me, the chute may not open. The parachute, slow to open. Try to brake. Diagonal side slip. Use the edges. Nothing worked. There was no fear. Don't fear, it's nothing. My ski covers. I felt the ice on my back. Falling. Just falling. The big rock. The Bergschund. I wonder what it meant, being alive.
Films where sensationalism becomes the only subject matter can only be a temporary answer to the documentary's falling audience. So what is the future?
The Japanese have done a lot more with time than we have. We've fully exploited place. The other important ingredient, time, the Japanese have been very patient and shown us that they can make a film over 15 or even 20 years.
This is the story of Takashi, a thalidomide victim filmed over a period of 15 years in Japan. In Britain, a film watched a group of children grow up over 21 years. This is Tony, aged 7, in 1963.
Tony! Don't turn around again. that cop. Yeah, I want to be a jockey with that cop.
This is a photo finish when I rode at Newbury. I'm the one with the white cap. I was beating a length and half a third and I had a photo finish. I'm as good or even better than most of them people, especially on this programme. I mean, I'm one of the tailenders. You think, oh, the East End boy, you know, and he ain't got no good education. But all of a sudden, the East End boy's got a car, motorbike, and he goes to Spain every year, and whatever. And have I worked for it? No, I'm here, putting bets on. You think, how does he do it? I've learned from driving a cab that people are individuals, whatever they are, upper class or, you know, middle class or, as in my case, you know, East Ender. But I'm only glad, you know, that I found out the difference at an early age, so I can judge people on what they are rather than who they are.
Since we're surrounded by people who are being born and dying and falling in love and getting married and going bankrupt and making millions and climbing Mount Everest and so forth, we're surrounded by real-life drama. But our problem is that we've insisted on conveying this by talking about it instead of living it with, through the camera.
So anyhow,
Human character seems to disappear when the documentary has to compete with news and drama. But when One American Family was filmed over a period of 7 months in 1973, this simple idea produced drama of warmth and texture.
Oh, she says that she wants you to come up and take us all out to dinner. Well, not her, but everybody else. Out to dinner some night.
Why?
Sunday night, because she says it'll be nice for him. Because Dad, you're like a pop star. We only hear about you and see your picture in fan magazines. We never see you in person anymore.
Never see the real Bill
The
Lodge.
real
Well,
you,
have
man.
to come down and I'm available from 8 to 5 in the office every day.
Yeah.
For consultation, loans,
Well,
touches, advice, whatever you want.
Well,
got it down here, baby.
Well, Dad, we're beginning to think that you took the business of being a father too lightly. And why, we're even thinking that you've forgotten about it altogether.
The same idea was repeated in Britain in 1974 with the Wilkins family of Reading. In this country, where the single documentary is now under pressure from ratings, this too could be a solution.
I'm marrying you.
Well, they're only my parents. I mean, they've only got my interest at heart, that's all.
Look, I'm marrying you, right? But when we've got a date...
You marry me, mate, you marry my family.
I know that, but will you wait a minute? Look, when we've got a date fixed up and that's fair enough, right? You can tell them. And they go, well, until then, right, as I say, leave it till tonight till we come in, right? And then we can talk about it. Because we know, we've said before, and you agree with me, that we will not get married on the 27th. We leave it.
I'm not agreeing with you putting it off at all.
If you're involved in something really vital and compelling in real life, it'll have virtues of the short story and virtues of the modern novel and virtues of the movie, and it'll be real.
For the moment, we are descending the ladder and going in for news, facts, and not fancies. I don't know, really. And that God knows what's going to happen in the future.
Next week, television examines the role of light entertainment.